Today on the All Kinds Weather Forecast, we have former All-American wide receiver and three-time SEC champion Chris Doering joins the show to break down the upcoming Gators football season. This is the All Kinds Weather Forecast. Welcome into another episode of the All Kinds Weather Forecast. I am your host, Chris Yanes, along with my co-host, Neil Schulman, and we are proudly bringing you a great show today, sponsored by 401k Generation. The All Kinds Weather Forecast is proudly sponsored by 401k Generation, the wealth management company that helps you invest today for your futures tomorrow. Their team of advisors is committed to providing guidance and education for your 401k plan and its participants. And they also offer a range of enrollment solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your company's 401k plan. Whether it's saving for your child's college, investment advice, or even your retirement, 401k Generation's team of advisors makes getting to know you at their top priority. Their advisors will tailor a path to assist you in navigating life's financial milestones and reaching your financial goals. 401k Generation, building stronger futures one generation at a time. For more information, contact them at 866-998-5879 or visit their website at 401kgeneration.com. And now we welcome in Chris Doering with SEC Network, as well as former All-American with the Florida Gators, three-time SEC champion. Chris, it's always great to have you on our show. You've been a recurring guest a couple of times now, so welcome back. And just how are things going with you right before the season starts?
Good, man. Yeah, it's good to be back with you guys. This became a bit of a tradition for a while. I think we may have missed last year, but I don't think I had a whole lot of nice, positive things to say last year anyway. So probably good that I missed it, and feel a lot more optimistic this year. So I'm sure you guys are, cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to exceed some expectations out there.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think a lot of people had a lot of positive things to say about the Gators last year. And that, honestly, that's probably a good place to start today with a little bit of a meta question. You are a former Gator player. You still root for the Florida Gators. That's pretty well known. You're also an SEC Network analyst. How do you balance those two worlds that you're a part of and provide unbiased analysis on the Gators while everyone knows you're still rooting for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the great thing about working for the SEC Network is all of us that are analysts, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, softball, everybody knows that we all played at one of the respective SEC schools, and they know that we have strong feelings and ties to to our alma maters, and so yeah, I think we all do a great job of separating kind of the fan side of us off the air to doing the work we have to do on the air. And one of the hardest things that I have to do is criticize the University of Florida. I love nothing more than to be able to shower praise on things that are going on with the coaches and players. But sometimes, especially in the last couple of years, it's required honesty that I think a lot of Gator fans sometimes take as me being disloyal. I try not to go on social media a ton because Saturday nights there's a lot of criticism on there, and we know that the cesspool of negativity is not necessarily representative of everybody watching. But at the same time, the negativity, the criticism that I get from Florida fans hurts a lot more than it does from any other fan base, as you guys can expect.
And I could imagine you probably, as a coworker with this individual, Peter Burns, you finally still want to win a bet. You guys have that annual bet. It's still on this year as LSU is still on the schedule.
Yeah, I think we've lost. I think I've lost. I want to say 6 straight bets. I think 5 football and 1 baseball World Series.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So hopefully we can break that streak. Getting them down in the swamp here. I think certainly makes it a little bit more attainable. Losing J.D. Daniels and those 2 first-round receivers also makes it a little more manageable. So, I'm just like I said about the season. I'm cautiously optimistic. I can finally have PB dressing up in one of those stupid outfits.
Yeah, no doubt. So being cautiously optimistic, do you have a record in mind? I know you kind of made some news the other day. You went on Allie Peak's show. We had her on last week for our State of the Program address. Do you have a record? You said this team would start 3-0, but do you have an overall record that you're comfortable putting the Gators at right now?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly believe, 5 wins, 4.5, whatever Vegas has set that total at is way too low. I understand that the schedule looks daunting. I like the way that the coaching staff and the players have accepted the challenge. I think they feel kind of disrespected, and I think they're laying in the cut a little bit. I don't think they really feel like people outside of the program know what they have this year. They're looking at them from the 2023 perspective, and not from what they are this year with the added transfer portal experience, with the experience that a lot of freshmen gained last year, trial by fire. So I actually think this team can win 7, maybe even 8 games, I said that in front of a Georgia fan the other day. It's like, wow, man, wow, you guys have really moved the goalposts in terms of what you expect. But I think going from 5 to 7 wins would be a nice sign of improvement. But really, to me, it's not even about the wins and losses. It's about the aesthetics. How does this team look? Do they look more organized? Do they look like they have more continuity? Does it look like the overall program's headed in the right direction? Those are the things that I'm looking for. And I think Coach Napier's done a nice job of making some coaching changes. I think that will reflect a more organized sideline. I think sometimes just because you have 100 analysts or whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a better football team. So I would like to see just a little bit more dissemination of information, the hierarchy, have it be a little bit more organized from the top down.
Yeah, it's pretty rich from a Georgia fan, by the way, about moving the goalposts, given that they spent 40 years, 41 years in between championships. It's the time that, for those of you who follow the Old Testament, that Moses led the Israelites through the desert for 40 years. That's the amount of time you went without a title. So let's cool it on that. But you talked about how the Gators are going to be an improved football team this year. I think a lot of people agree on that. The record is going to be the point of debate. What have you seen specifically that's better this year than it was a year ago?
Yeah, I think first thing that stands out to me, and obviously, I was covering the spring. Called the spring game for the SEC Network. I was at a couple practices. I've been out to a couple practices this fall during camp, including scrimmage on Saturday. And what stands out to me immediately is that we look more like what Georgia and Alabama and some of those top tier teams in the conference look, particularly on the offensive line. They were very intent on recruiting length. You see, I think what you saw in the transfer portal was 2 dynamics they were looking for: experience, which I think they added a ton of, particularly in the secondary, and then length, which you can see on the lines of scrimmage. Florida looks like an SEC ready football team now. So the talent, I think, has been improved. The depth of talent has been improved as well. And those are the kind of things that stand out to me off the jump. The other thing that stands out to me, and I love DJ Lagway. I'm excited about what he's going to bring in the future. But everybody knows, or should know, that this team is going to go as far as Graham Mertz can take you. Graham Mertz, when you watch the offense with Graham Mertz behind the center, it flows with a rhythm that no other unit on this team can flow like. And I think DJ Lagway understands he's got some growing to do, some experience to get. But what a great opportunity for him to learn from a true pro in what Graham Mertz is, and the fact that we got him back for a 6th year of eligibility. I think people are not giving him enough credit right now for that commitment and what that means. Like, as much as there's criticism about the transfer portal and NIL, Graham Mertz is what is right about college football right now. He needs to be celebrated more, not only within the fan base, but nationally as well.
Graham Mertz, definitely one of the more impressive people I've ever gotten to watch, cover, root for, etc. For the Gators or for anyone else. Definitely the kind of guy you can feel good about and say, that's a Gator. I'm proud to say that that's a Gator.
Yeah.
You've also been hearing that there are some issues that the Gators have that are not looking great right now that could potentially be liabilities if they're not fixed. Obviously, there is still a couple weeks left between now and Miami, and teams do get better as the year goes along. But what have you been hearing specifically that you're a little concerned about or worried about that needs to get shored up?
I feel good about the depth at every single position group, with the exception of the offensive line. And I think the offensive line, you feel good about probably your first 6. Hopefully you're developing a 7th and 8th that you can count on in case of injury or just rotation to keep guys fresh. You could see it at the scrimmages, rolling different groups of offensive linemen in there, trying to find that extra piece that can help you out. But I just talked about Graham Mertz and how far he's going to be able to take Florida. If they can't pass protect better than they did last year, it was an embarrassment at times. The number of hits that Graham was taking, the sacks that Florida was giving up. I do think between what they've added and moving some guys around to get them in more natural positions on the offensive line, I think that should help. But I feel good about every other position group outside of the offensive line. That's the big question mark to me.
Well, and speaking of scrimmage, I know they had a lot of players back yesterday. Was not sure if you attended that or not, but what have you been hearing or seeing at some of the scrimmages thus far in fall camp?
Yeah, I was there yesterday, and I would say that the defense probably got the best of the offense. Again, you could see some offensive line issues raising its head. I think and the defense was without several veteran guys that were being given the day off to rest. So it's so hard to tell in scrimmages, right? I mean, you've been going up against these guys every single day. You know each other's calls, you know each other's tendencies. I don't know that it's necessarily representative of what the entire campus looked like. I was at practice earlier in the camp and felt like the passing game looked good in 7-on-7, didn't necessarily look quite as good in team, and I think that goes back to again the offensive line. And let's not forget, I think as you look at Florida's first game of the season, the Hurricanes probably have one of the most talented and challenging defensive lines that Florida will play against this year. So I really hope that they're able to kind of get things together. But who knows, man? By the time you play against somebody else, I've been on teams before where I've been worried about our offense, and then we go play somebody else and we're clicking on all cylinders. So I think a change of opponent can certainly help both sides of the ball.
In fall camp, have you noticed maybe what running back they might be favoring in case Montrell Johnson Jr. can't go for the Miami game?
Yeah, not necessarily. I think Baugh looked good to me when I had a chance to watch him play. But yeah, I think you're still trying to figure out, who maybe is the guy. It sounds to me like Montrell's not going to be able to go. So I would imagine you try to see a rotation and kind of go with a hot hand as you get into the second and third quarters.
Yeah, I mean, well, from everything we've heard, the coaching staff feels comfortable about the depth of that room. Even when they lost Trevor Etienne in the offseason to Georgia, they almost didn't sweat it at all because they just felt who they had brought in that freshman class between JD Daniels, Jaden Baugh, and then the guys they already had returning, that they felt comfortable they could do anything. I think maybe the pass protection could be somewhat of a concern there because I think that was your best pass blocker, and against a team like Miami, who's coming in with a decent pass rush, could come up as a concern in that first game potentially.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, nowadays running backs are asked to do much more than carry the rock. You got to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield, which Florida, does throw the ball to the backs. Utilization of slipping guys out into the flats and getting into the routes, certainly is something that we've seen the last couple of years. But pass protection, especially if you're asking a freshman, that was one of the things that kind of stood out to me at times was not recognizing, as being the hot when you got more than you can protect, and guys getting their head around, giving Graham a chance to get the ball out. So between the pass protection and understanding, when you got to get your head around to help out your quarterback, those are two things that I think freshmen it takes a little bit of time to adjust to.
So one of the things that we've heard a lot about this offseason, and we'll go position by position at the end of the show in kind of a lightning round fashion, which I know you've done before with us, but talent upgrade. We've upgraded the talent. We've upgraded the experience. You got guys like Joey Slackman. You got guys like DJ Douglas, Tricrazy Bridges, Asa Turner. I don't know if you want to call Pup Howard an experience upgrade, but that's definitely a talent upgrade for sure there. Talent and experience have been upgraded. Then there's the thing that I wonder about the most, because with a new strength and conditioning coach, all new defensive assistants, do we think that it is considered a talent upgrade to go from the year one version of Kelby Collins, TJ Searcy, and then in the secondary, Sharif Denson, Jakeem Jackson, Jordan Castell, to the year two version with a new defensive backs coach in Will Harris and a new strength and conditioning coach? Is that a big upgrade for the Gators?
I think so, and I'll focus mostly on the off-season conditioning program. I'm talking with the players; they have raved about what's gone on, since the change in that position. It makes me a little sad for those guys to have gone through their time, however many years they've been here, and not had the benefit of getting bigger, stronger, faster as much as they probably could have. I think now, having something to contrast, and this, I'm not trying to speak negatively about any previous coach at all, but like this is an off season that I think, a lot of these older players are like, man, I wish we would have been doing this the entirety of my career here. So I think you'll see a significant upgrade just because of what they've gone through and the way their bodies have changed and the way they've been challenged. You guys remember back to, when Coach Tootin was here at Florida, when he took over, our toughness level took about a 5-notch jump. And I think a lot of what you go through in the offseason this time of year, not only to build the strength of your body, but to build the strength of your mind, I think you'll see the difference in that, paying difference in the dividends in the fourth quarter. Last year, Florida was in a lot of the fourth quarter ball games, but just either because of depth, either because of panic with young guys being back there, or just mental mistakes in the clutch. 4th and 17, you got to get off the field there. They're just Arkansas. You got to be able to execute 2-minute and kick a field goal to win the game. But Florida could have easily been a 7, maybe 8-win team if they just execute in late game situations. And I think the offseason conditioning program is going to be where you see that change the most in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, so we'll definitely ask about that in a second, but I wanted to talk about the strength and conditioning program for one more question here, because a lot of Gator fans were throwing out all kinds of complaints, as they do when things don't go well, right? There's always something wrong with this and that, whatever. One thing I heard a lot of last year was it's the strength and conditioning coach's fault that there are all these injuries, that Shamar James got hurt, that Cam Jackson was banged up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How much credence do you put into that? Do you tie the strength and conditioning program with guys getting hurt? And if not, what do you attribute that to? Just bad luck,
Yeah.
or what?
Well, Shamar, I mean, that was just ridiculous. They put the new rolls of grass out there in Jacksonville the week of the game. That was just a freak accident. I think you can attribute soft tissue injuries to maybe not being conditioned or being overused. I don't know how many of you guys have seen, the catapult system that's being utilized now, but being able to monitor workload, being able to monitor, top end speed, is that if baseline is set, if guys aren't, hitting that, are they getting overused a little bit? The science of the offseason conditioning programs is just amazing from, a couple decades ago when I played to where they are now. So, but I do think when you're having muscle pulls and tears and things like that, that can be a result of the strength and conditioning. But football is a contact sport. We're seeing it all over the SEC. The number of running backs that have gone down during fall camp at places like Texas A&M, here with Montreal, like some of that stuff you just can't avoid, whether it's a contact injury or even non-contact injuries. How many times do we see that where somebody puts a foot in the ground and tears their knee up, or an Achilles injury? Those things are not attributed to the strength and conditioning staff, but I do think soft tissue issues sometimes can go back to that.
Chris, switching gears a little bit, talking about defense and special teams, you mentioned a second ago execution at end of games was a huge problem. And I think a lot of that was on defense and special teams for a whole variety of reasons. What have you seen this offseason in a way they potentially upgraded that staff a little bit that we can feel confident we're going to see a big jump in defense and special teams this year?
Yeah, I mean, Coach Napier, I can tell you, feels very grateful and fortunate to have gotten the guy to come over from the Patriots to handle the special teams. Now it's I guess he's technically an analyst, but with the rules changing, he can be more involved on the field. I think that's going to be a game changer for Florida this year. I've also seen a lot of criticism on social media about using the mats to count. Like, why would you not want to? I've said there's tons of teams that use the mats to make sure that they got all their players on the field. I don't understand why that's a criticism. I know it's easy to make fun of Florida having 13 guys on defense last year, having 2 number 3s against Utah, and those things are not acceptable. So go make corrections. Use the things you need to help make sure you're not having those same mistakes raise their head again this year.
Yeah, honestly, my issue with that was PTSD. I saw the mat and I only saw 10 spots there. And I know number 11 is for the kicker, but I look at that and I go, no, we don't assume anything. We don't make any assumptions that this team can count to 11. No, I had some trauma there. But yeah, I mean, there's no debating that if things don't go well, you're not in any position to poo-poo on any attempts to correct them. And I think that's the big theme that Florida has really followed this offseason, is correcting the mistakes. But I have this question that may seem a little pessimistic on my end, but we've seen the last 2 years things go wrong for the Gators on the field, off the field too, but really on the field. The Gators find ways to lose games. And one of my big sayings on the podcast was good teams find ways to win games, bad teams find ways to lose games. I know the schedule is hard, but if you see the Gators again losing a lot of close games this year, be it to teams more talented like Georgia or Texas, or be it to teams on par with talent or less talented like a Kentucky or Mississippi State, if you see the Gators continuing to lose close games this year, is that just Billy Napier's DNA? Is that who he is in year 3?
Yeah. Yeah, I think first and foremost, you're right. I think it was Coach Lombardi or somebody that said, "Hey, winning is a habit. Unfortunately, so is losing." And I know you guys are younger than I am, but in those early '90s years, people called us roadkill because we would leave the swamp, we'd go on the road, and we'd lose. We get blown out by Tennessee or lose to Mississippi State, or find a way to lose a game that we shouldn't have. And then, we found a way to win that Kentucky game. We throw 7 interceptions on the road. We find a way to win late. And that really changed the trajectory of our program. Coach Spurrier talks about that night in Lexington being where we turned the corner and ultimately made those SEC and national championship run that we did. I think this team I thought the South Carolina game was going to be that last year. You make plays. South Carolina was the one that made mistakes and found a way to lose that game. But to Florida's credit, they made plays when they had to. The ball bounced their way a little bit. I do think when you're a team trying to figure it out, when you're trying to ascend to the next level, when you think you can but you're not sure, you have to have some good fortune. And I think that's why I love Florida playing at home against Miami in the opener. Everybody talks about how difficult the schedule is, but Coach Napier has embraced it and said, look, I'd rather play at Miami at home than go to Utah the way we started the season last year. Those guys that were freshmen in the secondary last year are now sophomores. These guys are going to have a chance to win a game with a decided home field advantage with the Swamp crowd showing up. I know to me, it's the most anticipated game. I've been around this program since I was 4 or 5 years old. This is the most anticipated home opener that I can ever remember, and maybe one of the biggest games of my life that I've seen Florida be involved in. It means so much. You win this game, I think that sets Florida on a path where they've got an awful lot of confidence, and instead of thinking they could do it, they can actually believe that they can. But to your question about is that in the DNA? I know there's a lot of people that are critical of Coach Napier maybe not being as fiery as they think he needs to be or showing more emotion. Sometimes that you need your coach to get on guys late in the game. You need to. I can tell you, we won games because we had Coach Spurrier on the sideline, because of the confidence that he exuded. We took on that. I do think that there's something to be said for this Florida team maybe being a little too lax at times.
I guess that's fair. I mean, at some point though, the defensive line's win rate, the coach's fieriness, whether or not you're able to get the 90,000 fans in the Swamp, at some point you just have to win games. Like everything else does become secondary. The wins have to come. And that's where I think we have to talk about the Gators schedule, because yes, I know Georgia lurks. I know Texas lurks. Mississippi is pretty good. LSU, is going to have talent. There are also a lot of games on the schedule Florida should win. I mean, Kentucky, we used to be beating every year like a drum, 31 straight. Now we can't beat them at all. Miami comes to the Swamp. Are they talented? Yeah, but so are we, and it's at home. Where do you stand in the debate of side A, it's a very tough schedule, and side B, too bad, you're the Florida Gators. You should be the team that other teams are afraid of, and you should start winning games.
Yeah, it's a tough schedule by name, right? These teams of what we've known them to be in the recent past, what they were last year. But, I had a chance to talk to Coach Napier in the spring. I mentioned his take on the opener. Yeah, well, we also, instead of having to go to Baton Rouge to play against LSU with a Heisman-winning quarterback and 2 first-round receivers, they come to Gainesville without those guys. Instead of going to Lexington, you get Kentucky coming to town. Instead of having to play Florida State with a Jordan Travis-led team, and you get a brand new quarterback there. So there's a lot I think that can happen. The projection of what teams are going to be in the preseason and what they actually become are 2 totally different things. I think the other thing that I love is like as a competitor, you want to play the best. I hated playing against, playing against Sanford after you play against Miami is a huge letdown feeling. Like, God, this sucks. I want to play the best. I want to go out there and try my hand at playing against the teams that we think are amongst the best in the country and seeing where I stand. I think the other thing, Florida's key to the season is twofold. Win early, both because I think your schedule does get more difficult in the second half, and for the confidence factor that we talked about. And you got to win your home games. Like I talked to some of the players, they're like, "Yeah, we get 7 home games," and I'm like, "Yeah, you lost to Arkansas at home last year. Like you can't just assume because they're home games that you're going to win, but you gotta win in the swamp, and you got to win in the first half of the season."
And they only leave the state of Florida 3 times. I mean, because they have the
Yeah.
cocktail party and then they go to Tallahassee. So, I mean, that is a nice advantage to have. I mean, I guess as a player, Chris, being not having to travel as far for some of those matchups doesn't make a difference, I guess, and more maybe the physical.
Yeah, I actually liked. I thought it was more fun to go on the road. I loved going to Jordan Hare and getting our bus rocked. I loved going to Knoxville and facing 100,000 ball fans. Like that's fun to me. But I also know that again, it depends on the team. I liked it because our team was full of veteran winners, and we had proven it by the time I had gotten to be a senior. These guys, I don't know, are there yet, but I think winning a big game on the road would be massive to help the confidence level and to show that that this is a team that has a much more mature mindset maybe than they did last year.
For sure. Final question before we get into our lightning round. Talking about Billy Napier as a play caller, we talked about him as a coach, and winning is it in his DNA or not? But he did make a change, promoting Russ Callaway to that co-offensive coordinator role. I think a lot of us are very curious to see what that's going to look like this season. But do you have any concern if Napier continues to be the main play caller?
Honestly, it's such a mixed bag right now. I mean, you go back to Eli Drinkwitz before last season, gave up the play calling duties to Kirby Moore, and it worked with flying colors. On the flip side, you go to Vanderbilt, Clark Lee, the head coach, taking back over the defensive play calling this year. Hugh Freeze firing Philip Montgomery, the offensive coordinator that he turned everything over to, and he's going to reinsert himself in the game planning and in some of the play calling. I played for a guy that was one of the best ever do it as a head coach and play caller, and so I know that it can be done. I also know that things have changed considerably now with all the things that a head coach are asked to do as the CEO of the program. But if my job was on the line, like I never understood a guy that works his way up by being a play caller, coordinator, game planner, and then gives that up when he gets to the highest level. I think it works for some, but I don't have a problem with Billy Napier as long as as long as he feels good with the people that he's surrounded himself with, that he can delegate some of the other things. I don't have a problem with him, betting on himself in an effort to get the program where he needs to be, or he's going to be out before too long. So I'd rather go down based upon my own doing than giving that to somebody else to do.
Yeah, well, you just touched on the talking point among 90% of Gator fans this year. Because in fairness, when you go 6-6 in year one and 5-7 in year two, the coach's status is going to be a talking point. Like that's just how it works in Florida. You were a part of 3 SEC championship teams. That is the standard. Florida so far has not really come close to that. So I'll ask it this way. I know that the caveat's going to be there, that you have to see it. You have to see what it looks like. Do they self-destruct? Are things cleaned up from last year, etc.? I know that that's there. But with that said, what do you think Billy Napier has to do to earn himself a 2025 season?
I don't think they're firing him in 2024, short of an absolute disaster. If it just things go off the rails, there's discipline issues. You look like there's no continuity at all. I could see that, but short of that disaster scenario, I don't think that Scott Strickland's moving on from Billy Napier this season. I do think you're seeing a lot of improvement in terms of the talent that they've brought in. I have a lot. Go back and look at one of the things I think this staff does really well is identifying talent in the transfer portal and projecting what they can do in this system. Whether we're talking about Montrell Johnson coming over initially from Louisiana with those guys, or whether we're talking about Ricky Pearsall a couple years ago, Graham Mertz. They've really done a nice job of identifying good fits, both in terms of scheme and in culture. So I think you're headed in the right direction. The talent continues to be upgraded. I do worry a little bit about the recruiting class now, where the rankings are. I mean, that's a little troublesome when you feel like you have been making a lot of headway, but winning some ball games on the field can lead to some positivity there to help improve that. But I don't think, and I think one of the other things that helped out Billy Napier, if I'm being honest, is the success that Todd Golden had. Scott Strickland hired those two guys in the same season, and so if both of them aren't showing any improvement, that could be something that could cause a new president maybe to look at as it relates to Scott Strickland's job. But I do think Scott Strickland believes in Coach Napier, and I think he wants to see him get to the level of success that he believed he could when they hired him.
For sure. Well, Chris, lightning round time. We're going to go quickly position by position, 30 seconds each one. Just kind of give us your thoughts on the position, how it looks, and kind of maybe some of the players that we should be looking for this season. So obviously, we talked about quarterback already. I think that not much else needs to be said there with you got Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway. I'll ask this though about that position. Do you see DJ Lagway having packages this season that makes an impact?
I do not. I do not. I think people want to compare this to like Tim Tebow and Chris Leak. It's a totally different situation. I think you see DJ Lagway get some experience when Florida's winning games, and you put some of your backups in. I don't like the idea of forcing a guy in there just to get him in the game. And I think that DJ and his family are different than a lot of really highly recruited players, particularly at the quarterback spot. I think DJ's father has been very vocal about how much he appreciates Graham and how he thinks he needs to be able to watch and learn and have some time to kind of acclimate to the college level in the SEC.
Yeah, definitely. Those cerebral quarterbacks tend to be very successful at the University of Florida. History is any indicator. So hopefully that's the case with DJ Lagway when it is his time. Running back, we talked about that really quick. Anything additional to add for that room?
No, I would just say that I am very impressed with the talent that they've accumulated there. If there was an injury, a position that you could sustain an injury like Montrell's, I do think it's at the running back spot. Anxious to see. Everybody plays 2 and 3 running backs nowadays, but anxious to see kind of who takes the lead there now that Johnson's out, at least for the opener.
And now your favorite position group, wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm really high on the receivers. Trey Wilson's the best player on the football team. I'd like to see him get more opportunities within the flow of the offense, create some game plans to get him some one-on-ones. Other guys are going to definitely be able to have some success because of the focus defense is put on him. But going out and getting DK from Wisconsin and getting the Badger kid from Arizona State, I think was nice. Looking for one of those two, Mizell and Gene, to kind of step up. I'm a big Khalil Jackson fan, obviously, knowing and having known him since he was young and playing with his dad and uncle as long as I did. I do think this is a position group that's amongst the deepest and most talented on the field.
Could you see someone like Tank Hawkins potentially playing special teams?
I have not. I could see him playing on offense too. You hear the reports of the speed. He didn't. I don't believe he dressed yesterday. I don't think. But hearing all the reports of how fast he is and how much he's kind of making an impact out there, I think you could see him both in the special teams and on offense.
All right, we'll lump these two together: tight end, offensive line.
Man, I'm excited about Boardingham. I think he takes another step forward. Florida wants to run a lot of multiple tight end sets, and so I think that's an integral part of what this team's going to be offensively. So those guys are important there. Offensive line we talked about earlier. I still think they need to develop some depth. I do worry about that was one of the real liabilities last season. I think kicking Damian George down into the guard position is a nice move. Hopefully Cam Waits can be healthy this year, but I worry about that depth. I think finding that 7th and 8th player on the offensive line to help the rotation is going to be key.
All right, switching sides to defense now. We'll start with the defensive line, edge, interior. What are we seeing there?
Yeah, the Jamari Lyons thing was disappointing. Another big injury, but excited about getting Justice Boone back. It was fun to get to see some of the young guys out there. I know we're talking about D-line and all right now, but watching Miles Graham out at practice yesterday was fun. LJ McCray, like I think there's a lot of young guys that are going to get an opportunity to contribute this year. But the kid from Penn, Slackman, like I've heard nothing but great reviews about him. I thought he was going to be more of a rotational guy, a backup, but I think he's earned the first team reps, and I think he's going to be a huge addition up front too. So I do think defensive line, both in terms of interior and edge, they're starting to look a lot more like the SEC top tier teams.
That's good news. All right, so you talked about Miles Graham. Let's move to the linebacker room. A little bit of a revamped room with the freshmen as well as Pup Howard coming in.
Yeah, the Pup Howard acquisition I think is huge. I'd love to have a little bit more veteran experience at the linebacker spot, but I do think there's a lot of really good young talent out there. And I was worried about Miles Graham. I had heard whispers of his back, in the offseason after he had first signed, being something that could really stunt his career at Florida. So hopefully he can stay healthy. But I do think that you asked me about question marks earlier. Offensive line, biggest question mark. I would say the linebacker probably is my other question mark where I want to see who emerges there. But getting Pup Howard was much needed, obviously.
For sure. All right, we'll finish off with the secondary. DBs, safeties. What are we looking at there as far as hopefully an improvement this season?
Yeah, going back to I talked to some of the coaches in the offseason and Austin Armstrong specifically. Like when you're in fourth quarters of ball games and you're playing, on the road at Utah, or you're playing against SEC teams in big time moments like that, you look back, you got a true freshman playing at the safety position or whatever. That's a tough recipe for success. I think the number was like 25% of the snaps last year on the defensive side were taken by true freshmen, which again, that's not an ideal situation. But I think between those guys getting the reps they did, going out and getting Turner and Bridges and those guys, I do think that the secondary is going to be a strength of this team last year. They were a little bit of a liability, but really excited about that, turning that into a strength between who they went out and got in the portal and the new coach to coach the secondary. I think that's going to be a big time flip in the column from negative to a positive.
Chris, I want to be respectful of your time. One final question, very simple. Fill in the blank. The Florida Gators shock the world and win the national championship in 2024 if blank.
Oh, golly. Oh, if they got to have a lot of good breaks go their way. I would say specifically if the offensive line can dominate up front. I don't think people realize that that Coach Napier typically has been a run first kind of offense. You want to be able to run the football. They didn't do that very well last year. Certainly didn't pass protect Graham as well. I think they have a lot of pieces that it's a far off hope that they win a national championship. But now, really, honestly, all you got to do is win 10 games. If you can win 10 games, you get into the 12-team playoff field, and who knows? So it is a totally different dynamic than what it's been in years past. I've got them winning 7 or 8 games. If you can squeak out a victory, if you can go on the road, think about it. We've dominated Tennessee the last couple of decades, so it's not far-fetched to think you could go up there and somehow find a win. Maybe that gives you number 9, and can you find a way to go to Jacksonville and win? Can you win in Tallahassee? That would be the differentiating factor there. So as you asked me the question, I was like, that's impossible. But as I'm thinking through it more, you get to 10, you chip in the chair in the postseason, you got a chance.
Well, Chris, we couldn't thank you enough for your time today. This was a lot of fun. We got to do it again soon. So from all of us here at the All Kinds of Weather Forecast, thank you and good.